Thank you for your interest in this historic preservation program by the Alabama Historical Commission. This presentation discusses ad valorem taxes on historic property and the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. There are rarely any grant funds available for rehabilitating privately owned historic property. However, there are tax incentives for owning and for rehabilitating historic property at the state and federal levels. The Federal Historic Tax Credit Program has been around since 1976 and is the largest federal program that specifically supports historic preservation. These credits are an important tool for encouraging private investment in the rehabilitation of our historic buildings. These projects also create jobs and stimulate economic development in our historic communities. This presentation explains a property tax benefit for owning historic buildings and the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program for income-producing properties. In Alabama, there is a property tax benefit for owning historic property. The LID bill was signed in the late 1970s that designated all historic buildings, regardless of use, as Class 3 property. Class 3 is the most common property type and includes agricultural and forest land, residential, and historic property. Class 3 property is assessed at 10% of the current use value of the property. Historic buildings are those that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places or that are eligible for listing. To determine if a property is eligible, the owner must submit an application to the Alabama Historical Commission. This application is available on our website. Staff reviews the application and issues a letter to the owner indicating its eligibility. Owners then present the letter of eligibility to the Revenue Commissioner in their county to receive the reassessment. Remember, this does not offer any additional benefit to homeowners since residences are already considered Class 3 property, but it would apply to investment property like rental homes and commercial buildings. Property owners must complete the front page of the application. If the building is already listed in the National Register, provide a copy of that National Register information, along with the district map with the building identified and current photos. If the building is not listed in the National Register, write a physical description of the building, noting historic features and finishes and significant alterations. Provide the history of the property and the reason it is eligible for the National Register. Finally, provide a location map and current photos. Another incentive program for historic buildings is the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program, which provides a 20% tax credit for historic buildings. This program is for income-producing properties only, and the buildings must be listed in the National Register. Projects must be substantial, which means that the rehabilitation expenditures exceed the cost of the building. And the applicant must go through an application process to get the project approved. Buildings must be listed in the National Register of Historic Places, either individually or as a contributing resource in a historic district. Buildings must be income producing after the rehabilitation. And the projects must be substantial, which means that qualified rehabilitation expenditures exceed the adjusted basis of the property, or $5,000, whichever is greater. Adjusted basis is purchase price minus the cost of the land minus depreciation plus improvements. Let's say, for example, that Bob purchased property a number of years ago for $150,000. The cost of the land was $50,000. The building depreciated by $35,000, and Bob patched the roof a few months after purchase for $12,000. Bob's qualified rehabilitation expenditures must exceed $77,000 to be eligible for the program. Projects must follow historic preservation standards. The National Park Service developed these standards to guide work on historic buildings. There are actually 4 treatment standards: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. The most widely used treatment and the treatment used in historic tax credit projects is rehabilitation. Rehabilitation allows for reasonable alterations to accommodate a new use. They apply to work on both the exterior and the interior of the building. All work associated with a project is reviewed. So if there are additions, new construction, or site work associated with a development, they are reviewed for their compatibility with the historic building. The predominant message of the standards is to repair historic material, features, and spaces so that the historic character of the building remains in the new use. There's a 3-part application process, where the first 2 parts are submitted prior to the beginning of the project, and the final part is submitted after the project is complete. The Part 1 application certifies that the property is historic and eligible for the program. Applicants must submit a physical description, a history and a significance statement, photographs of the existing condition which are keyed to plans, and a location map. The Part 2 application certifies that proposed work follow the standards. A detailed description of work must include all work to be performed on the property. Descriptions would include things like the roof and the foundation, exterior walls, windows, a storefront or a porch, floors, walls, and ceilings, upgrades of mechanical, electrical, or plumbing systems, and site work. Plans of the existing condition and plans showing the proposed work supplement the application. Other drawings such as elevations and sections or details are also helpful in a review. The Part 3 application is submitted after all work is complete and provides photos of the finished work. The historic tax credit equals 20% of qualified or eligible expenditures and is used to reduce federal income taxes owed by the applicant. There are project costs that are eligible and not eligible for this tax credit program. Expenses that qualify for the tax credit include both hard and soft costs. Typical rehabilitation activities like structural repairs, roofing, repairing plaster, refinishing floors, installing new HVAC or plumbing, and soft costs like architectural fees and construction management costs are all examples of eligible expenditures. Expenses that do not qualify for the tax credit include things like acquisition costs, constructing an addition, landscaping, area rugs, and furnishings. A tax credit is a reduction of one's tax liability. So if an applicant has $100,000 of qualified rehabilitation expenditures, they earn a $20,000 tax credit to use toward what they owe on their federal income taxes. The tax credit can be claimed ratably over 5 years, beginning in the year the building is placed into service. If the tax credit cannot be used all at once, the excess can be carried back 1 year and forward 20. Applicants must continue to own the building and use it for income-producing purposes for 5 years after placing the building into service. The Alabama Historical Commission is the point of contact for anyone who wishes to apply for a project involving a building in Alabama. We assist the applicant through the application process to ensure that they have a complete application and to alert them of problematic issues with their proposed rehabilitation. We also have guidance for rehabilitation treatments and methods. The National Park Service is the federal agency that reviews and makes decisions on the projects. The IRS is copied on all National Park Service decisions and can audit any applicant's tax return. Applicants should plan ahead and make sure they give the review process at least 60 to 90 days. Information about the 20% tax credit program is available online at the National Park Service website. The website also has the standards for rehabilitation and guidance on interpreting these standards, as well as technical how-to information. If you have questions about either of these programs, please check out the information on our website and contact the Alabama Historical Commission.